Hey guys, Luke on Sean's channel. Today I'm going to be profiling Sky Strikers yet again. New ban list treated us somewhat well. We have Upstart now at 3, so that's pretty good. More spells to go off for Engage. Engage still at 2 though, unfortunately. But yeah, this deck has a lot more draw power now. Really excited. Great to get more spells in the graveyards. Without further ado, this is Sky Strikers. Now, 3 copies of Raye. Raye is the main starter for this deck. I presume everyone watching this already knows what Sky Strikers do anyways, but still, I'll just give you a rundown. The reason why Raye is so good is not only is she the main combo starter for going into your other Sky Striker Link monsters, but she has a regeneration effect that while this card's in your graveyard in the face of Sky Striker Ace Link monster you control survive battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can actually special summon Raye out from the graveyard. Not only is that the reason why Raye is the main person of the deck, but also she has a quick effect that you contribute this card and special summon one Sky Striker Ace monster from the extra deck to the extra monster zone. So this is really good because not only is Raye immune to the likes of targeted destruction because she's able to just swap herself out, but also the fact that we can regenerate her to continue our plays if we get interrupted is really good. So Raye is definitely essential to run a 3 in this build. We do the 1 copy of Roze. That's the way it's going to be. I don't think there's any reason to run more than 1 because you can dump Roze off a H.A.M.P. Roze is still pretty good. However, if a Sky Striker Ace monster is no more special summoned while she's in your hand, you can actually special summon her out. So it's a good way if you want to early go into your Link 2s. Also, Roze is an effect that you can special summon her from the graveyard if a monster in your opponent's extra monster zone is destroyed by one of your card effects. So it's very good if you want Roze to kind of come out from the grave to go in for that last little bit of damage. But the main reason we want to run Roze is because it gets the full effect off a Linkage, which we'll go into a bit later. But basically the sum of it, you need your both light and dark Sky Striker monsters in your graveyard in order to get the full effect off a Linkage. So 1 copy of Roze. 1 copy of H.A.M.P. H.A.M.P is a Sky Striker card, which is great because we can search him off of Engage. But it's basically the kaiju of the deck. So the fact that this deck has a searchable kaiju is really good. The only downside of it is that you need to be controlling a Sky Striker Ace monster in order to summon him. But not only can you use him as a kaiju to tribute your opponent's side of the field, you can actually tribute something from your side of the field in order to special summon H.A.M.P to one of your main monster zones. The reason why this is good in some circumstances because it's 2500 attack, which can be good for getting over some problematic monsters. So 1 copy of H.A.M.P. Rounding off our monsters, we're going to just go through the hand traps now. 3 copies of Ash Blossom, of course the most universal hand trap there is, so definitely run this at 3. And then we're going to end it with 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. I think this is definitely a Droll format, so I think main decking it is very important. What seems to be dominating now are big heavy combo decks that add a lot to the hand. So definitely running Droll at 3, maximizing it as much as possible, definitely essential in this build. So 3 Ash and 3 Droll rounds off our monsters in this build. Going into the spells, starting with arguably the most powerful one in the deck, 2 copies of Engage. Unfortunately, it is still semi-limited, so that's all we can run it at. Engage is a searcher of the deck. If you control no monster in the main monster zone, add a Sky Striker card from your deck to your hand, except for itself, and then if you have 3 more spells in the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. Basically, the main gimmick of Sky Striker spells is that you need to control no monsters in your main monster zone. This is a very link heavy deck, so of course you don't usually have a bunch of monsters in your main monster zone, so we don't really worry too much about that. But also they have their secondary effects as well that kind of like gives it to its full power. So not only is Engage a good searcher, you can also get a blind draw as well if you have 3 more spells in the graveyard. That's why I think Engage, probably the most powerful Sky Striker spell, definitely run it at 2. Sticking with the powerful Sky Striker spells, 3 copies of Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor targets 1 effect monster your opponent controls and negates effects, and if you have 3 more spells in the graveyard, you can actually take control of that monster until the end of this turn. The reason why that's so good is because you can activate this during battle phase, take your opponent's monsters, and you can still attack with them, which I find to be really good. But also you can even use some of those monsters for link fodder, or also in some circumstances, as you'll see, some XZ fodder as well. But we'll get into that a bit later. So 3 copies of Widow Anchor, very essential for this build. Stepping away from the typical Sky Striker spell cards that need you to run 3 spells in the graveyard in order to get the full effect, we're going to talk about Linkage real quick. Linkage is the main reason you run Roze. So Linkage is also a really good starter. So if you control no monster in the main monster zone, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace monster from your Echo deck by sending 1 other card you control to the graveyard, which is really good because you can just, if you're really stuck, you just set a card face down, activate Linkage, send that face down card to the graveyard, and then especially summon a Sky Striker Ace monster. However, the fact that it is a quick play spell, the card doesn't necessarily need to be face down, so you can activate your Upstart Goblin and then in order to get a draw, but you can still activate your Linkage to send the Upstart Goblin to the graveyard in order to bring out a Sky Striker Ace monster from the extra deck. So overall, it's just a really, really good card. Main reason why we run Roze in this build is because Linkage has a secondary effect. The monster you special summon off of Linkage gains 1000 attack if you have a light and dark Sky Striker monster in your graveyard, i.e. being your Raye and your Roze. So the fact that it's able to get our small Sky Striker monsters with usual 1500 attack up to at least 2500 is really, really good for the build. So I think 3 copies of Linkage, definitely want to maximize yourself on this. It is definitely well worth it. 1 copy of Multirole. Arguably you can run more than just 1 copy, but I'm sitting comfortable with just a 1 copy of Multirole, although it is a very powerful card. Multirole is a continuous spell, and once per turn you can target one other card you control and send to the graveyard, and then your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to your spell cards for the rest of the turn, which of course is very, very powerful considering Sky Strikers rely heavily on their spell cards. But not only that, once per turn during the end phase you can set Sky Striker spells with different names from your graveyard up to the number of Sky Striker spell cards you activated the turn while this card was face up on the field. So what you can basically do is if you activate Multirole very early in the turn and you use a bunch of your Sky Striker spells like Linkage, Widow Anchor, or even Engage, what you can do during the end phase is you can actually just reset them for the following turn. Linkage and Widow Anchor are very, very good because they can be interruptions during your opponent's turn, considering that they are quick play spells, but Engage is good to kind of like set so you can activate during your turn. However, I will say just be very, very careful because after you use those set Sky Striker spells, they actually get banished instead of going to the graveyard. So although it is very, very good, I think you still need to be very careful. Pretty much the reason why we run Multirole at just 1. Going back to more traditional Sky Striker spells, we're going to run a copy of Afterburners. Afterburners is just a monster removal. So if you control no monster in main monster zone, target one face-up monster on the field and destroy it. And then if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you can destroy 1 spell or trap on the field. So very, very good monster removal, but also spell and trap removal is still very good for this build. We run 1 copy of Shark Cannon. As you guys know, the graveyard is pretty much your second hand in Yu-Gi-Oh! So Shark Cannon is a good way to target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. But again, since it's a Sky Striker card, if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you can actually special summon that monster to the field, to your field instead, which can be very, very good. However, that monster cannot attack, but you can still use it as link material and stuff like that. But also, a good thing is that that monster you steal, you actually get to keep it. So there's not time limit on it like Widow Anchor. 1 copy of Hornet Drones. Hornet Drones is limited, and honestly I do kind of agree that it could stay that way just so other decks don't take full advantage of it. So Hornet Drones is another starter for this deck. If you control no monster in main monster zone, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace token. Which is very good because if you don't necessarily have a Raye or a Linkage in your hand, Hornet Drones is just a good way to start off your plays by summoning a token and then using it to go into your Sky Striker Link monsters. The other effect that this has when it has 3 more spells in the graveyard is that the token gains 1500 attack and defense, which can be good in some circumstances, but considering that the token summons in defense mode, it doesn't come up an awful lot. So only 1 copy of Hornet Drones. Now 1 copy of Area Zero. Area Zero is very good. It can get you out of a pinch if you're lucky, because what Area Zero can do is target 1 other card you control, excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, and if you do, you can excavate a Sky Striker card among them and then shuffle the rest into your deck. The reason why this is so good is because since I aforementioned that Raye has a quick effect, the cost of this card is only targeting. So what you can do is you can use Area Zero and target Raye. Then you can chain Raye to go into something else, but Area Zero still gets a full effect. It excavates top 3 and then add a Sky Striker card among them. But not only that, Area Zero also has another effect. This card is destroyed while it's in the field zone. You're able to special summon a Sky Striker monster from your deck, so it's a good way to get your Raye out. Also, the fact that you can pop this off Multirole is very, very good for your starters as well, because not only do you get Raye out, but also your opponent cannot respond to your spell cards. So 1 copy of Area Zero is very, very good for the build. That rounds off the Sky Striker spells, but time to talk about some staples now. We run 2 copies of Triple Tactics Trust. Trust is an insane card. If your opponent has activated a monster effect during your turn, pretty much any time during your turn, you're not locked into your main phase like Talent does. After that happens, set 1 normal spell trap directly from your deck. but it cannot be activated that turn. However, if your opponent controls a monster and activates a monster effect during your turn, you can add a normal spell or trap directly to your hand, and that can be activated this turn. So Trust is really good going first or second. What we mostly do with this is we're able to set, on our first turn, is we're able to set an imperm or some sort of disruption when your opponent is going. But not only that, if your opponent interrupts during your turn and you're going second, it's a good way to kind of dig deeper for your starters. Like you can search Engage off of this, or even if you want, you can search a talent. But we'll go further into that a bit later. So 2 copies of Trust I find to be very good for this build, but it's really good on top of 3 triple tactics talent. Talents has pretty much become a staple for most decks now, just considering that hand traps are such a big thing in Yu-Gi-Oh now, pretty much like a cornerstone of the game itself. What Talent does, it has 3 very powerful effects that you can activate if your opponent has activated a monster effect during your main phase. The 3 effects, you can choose one among them to activate, one being draw 2 cards, one is take control of your opponent's monster until the end phase, another one is look at your opponent's hand, choose 1 card from among it and shuffle into the deck. I really like this. I think you should maximize it out to 3. If you want to kind of side it out, that's absolutely fine, but I find all of these effects can be really good and help you out in tight situations, which is why I run triple tax talent at 3. Also, the fact that this is a spell card and you're pretty much boosting your Sky Striker spells to full capacity by using more of these, I think is very good for the build. Now, 1 copy of Reinforcing the Army. Raye and Roze are both warriors, so of course you want to get to them as soon as possible and get another spell in the grave. Rhoda, definitely essential to run 1. 1 Call by the Grave. I know this deck kind of goes down the control route, however, you can still pop off and make it a combo deck. So in order for us to not get interrupted, 1 copy of Call By. 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet I find to be essential. The main thing that we want to do in this deck is control the board, and we do that by making sure that your opponent does not activate any monster effects. Forbidden Droplet's a good way to kind of stop your opponent from popping off, and also it's a good way that you're able to kind of go second. It's a lot better than Dark Ruler, and I'll tell you why. Forbidden Droplet, you can send any number of other cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard and choose that many effect monsters your opponent controls. Until the end of this turn, their attack is halved, and also your opponent cannot activate those cards' effects. Also, another good thing about that is that your opponent cannot respond to this card depending on the same type of cards you send to the graveyard. So 1 good thing that you can do with Droplet is you can actually just activate Imperm, and then you can chain Droplet to it and send the Imperm. Imperm still goes through, but not only that, since you sent a trap card to the graveyard for Droplet to get its full effect, your opponent cannot respond with traps. And same goes if you send spell cards or monster cards, your opponent cannot respond with those type of cards too. So it's just very good. Droplet, definitely maximize it. 3 copies in the build. I run 1 copy of Harpies. Honestly, you can put this in side deck if you want, but I just find it to be very good. I'm not too concerned about back row removal anymore now that a bunch of the floodgates have been limited to 1. But we can still run into trouble with back row, so definitely running 1 copy of Harpies. I main deck it if you want to side it, no problem at all, but definitely essential to have somewhere in the build. Rounding things off with more draw power, I know Pod Desires was recently unlimited at 3 copies, but I still find running at 2 is more than enough in this build. We have a lot of other draw power anyways, and we don't want to banish all of our good cards considering we run a lot of 1-ups considering Multirole and Roze. So Desires at 2 I think to be very good for this build. If you want to run at 3, you can go right ahead. However, the reason why I'm more comfortable running at 2 now is because we have 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin is pretty simple. You can activate it and then what it allows you to do is draw 1 card and your opponent gains 1000 life points. I'm more leaning towards this being a control kind of deck, so you're not really worried about OTKing your opponent with Sky Strikers. In fact, the only way you can really OTK your opponent with Sky Strikers is if you're doing Linkage OTK, in which case Upstart doesn't help with that. But since we're leaning more towards the control route, I find running 3 copies of Upstart to be absolutely fine. And also it's another spell in the graveyard to get your full effect of your striker cards. So 3 copies of Upstart, very good for the build. Going into the traps now, we run 3 copies of Imperm. Imperm is a good effect negation and also a good interruption, because if you control no cards, you can activate this card directly from your hand. You guys already know what Imperm does. You don't need me to explain why you need to run at 3 in this build. Round things off, we run 2 copies of Evenly Matched. Yes, I main deck this. I really like Evenly Matched, not only because if we're stuck in a position where we need to go second, Evenly Matched is a good board breaker, but even if we're in a situation, considering that Sky Strikers don't build up a massive unbreakable board, if we're able to kind of chip away at our opponent and yet they're still fighting back with all they got, you can still activate evenly matched and completely destroy their board. Not only that, this is also searchable off of thrust as well, which I find to be very, very good. So running 2 copies of it, I find to be absolutely fine for this build. In fact, if you want to run it at 1, that's no problem. I just like the consistency of running it at 2, so I definitely run it at 2 in this build. For those of you who want to run a full playset, you can go ahead, but I will say further along in this video, you will see I have the 3rd copy in the side deck. Going into the extra deck now, we run 3 copies of Kagari. Kagari is great. When Kagari is summoned, you can target 1 Sky Striker spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Also, Kagari gains 100 attack for each spell in the graveyard. Not necessarily a Sky Striker spell, any spell, so you're able to get her up to a ridiculous amount of attack. On top of, if you bring her out with Linkage, this card can get up to 3000 attack easily. So I think Kagari is definitely essential to run at 3. It's good recursion, and also it's a good way to build up a big beat stick to destroy your opponent's monsters. Shizuku, kind of like the opposite of Kagari. Rather than getting a card from your graveyard to your hand when it's summoned out, Shizuku adds a Sky Striker spell from your deck to your hand during the end phase that it's summoned. Good thing about Shizuku as well is that she can make your opponent's monsters lose 100 attack for every spell in the graveyard, much like Kagari but opposite. And the reason why that's so good is because most of the time you end with Shizuku, so most of your opponent's monsters that they summon out, they can't really beat over Shizuku because she's draining their attack points. I definitely think Shizuku is very important to max out in this build, so definitely do that. I run 2 copies of Hayate. There's reason for this, but you'll see kind of later. We're just very, very tight for room. Hayate is really, really good because Hayate can attack directly, and also after damage calculation, if this card battled, you can send 1 Sky Striker card from your deck to the graveyard. What's so good about this is that it's a Sky Striker card, so you can actually send your Roze from your deck to the graveyard, which is just absolutely great because it makes Linkage live, and it's an essential combo piece if you're going for the Linkage OTK. So 2 copies of Hayate is absolutely fine. There's a few other cards in this extra deck that might be a bit up there in price, so if you're kind of trying to stick to a budget, you can run the 3rd copy of Hayate rather than some of the other cards in this build. But 2 copies is what we run in this build. 1 copy of Kana. Honestly, I just want another Sky Striker name to go into in case I'm put in a tough position. So 1 copy of Kana is all you need. Kana is pretty good. She can actually help you out if you're going for if you're going to time and you need to gain some life points. Because what Kana does, she lets you gain 100 life points for each Sky Striker spell you activate while she's face up on the field, which is really, really good. And not only that, if Kana is brought out, what you can do on summon is target 1 face-up monster that your opponent controls. It cannot attack until the end of the next turn, which is really, really good to protect yourself for another turn. So 1 copy of Kana. We run 1 copy of Zeke. Zeke is great. When Zeke is link summoned, you can target 1 monster on the field and banish it, which is really, really good removal. But we also really need a link too, because we need some way to get rid of our opponent's monsters if we're stealing them off of Widow Anchor and the likes. So running Zeke is definitely very, very good. Zeke also has a secondary effect that doesn't really come up too often. What I can do is once per turn you can target 1 other card you control, and this card gains 1000 attack, and then you can send that targeted card to the graveyard, which doesn't come up an awful lot, but also just good to know. I also run Dark. Dark is pretty good because all you need is 2 monsters, including a Dark monster, i.e. your Raye or your Zeke or whatever. When you go into Darks, you can actually steal 1 Dark monster from your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to a zone it is points to. Reason why that's so good is because a bunch of decks nowadays, they always run Dark monsters, so you have no problem if your opponent having a Dark monster in the graveyard. And it's also really good for us to link climb as well. But not only that, Dark also helps us out because if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, what you can actually do is add 1 Dark monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand, which is a really good way to actually search out your Raye since she meets that criteria. So 1 copy of Dark. Now we're link climbing all the way up to Nightmare Unicorn. Nightmare Unicorn, a great link tree. What it's able to do is when this card is link summoned, you can discard 1 card and then target 1 card in the field and shuffle it back into the deck. This is really, really good removal considering that a bunch of cards cannot be destroyed, so Nightmare Unicorn is a good bit of removal for that. We're link climbing all our way up to Access Code Talker. Access Code Talker, Fantastic boss monster. What this does is when it is brought out, you can target one link monster that was used for its link summon, and this card gains 1000 attack times the link rating. So if you use Unicorn to go into this, what makes that so good is that this card can actually go up to 5300 attack. Not only that, Access Code Token can banish link monsters from the field or graveyard in order to destroy cards that your opponent controls. So I definitely run Access Code Talker in this build. It's pretty much a very good board wipe / boss monster for this build, so running it is very much essential for Sky Strikers. We're going to end things off with the AA-ZEUS. Zeus is fantastic if you're going up against an AA-ZEUS deck. What you're able to do is activate Widow Anchor and steal that AA-ZEUS, and then you can use that to that AA-ZEUS to attack. And not only that, if you're going to your main phase too, since Widow Anchor gives that monster back during the end phase, you don't necessarily have to do that. If you're able to get that AA-ZEUS monster to battle, you can actually just overlay that AA-ZEUS monster with Zeus, and then you actually get to keep the monster, and you get an additional 3000 attack and defense body on the field. Zeus is really, really good for that, but also it's a really good board wipe as well. During cash format, I remember someone had a ridiculous amount of material under a Rise Heart, and I was able to steal their Rise Heart with Widow Anchor, and I was able to steal it to make Zeus, and I was able to use Zeus, detach 2 materials, and completely wipe the field. That's why Zeus is so good. I definitely recommend running it here. If you want to change it with some other tech option, you go ahead, but I definitely think Zeus is well worth the slot. And finally, rounding it off, we have Zeus 2, also known as Super Star Slayer Typhoon Sky Crisis. This card is very good. It's not as good as Zeus. However, I was hemming and hawing between playing this or the third copy of Hayate, but I ultimately went with this just because I think its effect is too good. So during the turn, after your opponent's special summons 2 or more monsters from the extra deck, you can XZ summon this card by using one monster you control with the highest attack. It can be your choice of type, and then you can transfer its materials onto this card. If you do, you cannot normal summon or special summon for the rest of this turn, which is fine. You mostly go into this during main phase 2 anyways, much like Zeus. But also, while this XZ summon monster is on the field, neither player can activate the effects of monster with 3000 or more attack, which is absolutely fine. Most of our Sky Striker monsters don't have 3000 or more attack. In fact, they're actually quite small, so you're still able to get the full effect. But if your opponent is using like really, really big monsters and activating their effects all the times, Sky Crisis can absolutely shut them down. And also it has the effect that once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card and return 1 monster from the field to the hand, which is really, really good. Again, a lot of cards can't be destroyed by battle, so it's a good way to, returning to the hand is a good way to get around that as removal. So I definitely think it's worth running Sky Crisis. If you want to run the third Hayate instead, absolutely go ahead, no problem at all. We're going to round things off with the side deck now. I run 3 copies of Nibiru. Nibiru is really good to keep combo decks in check. But also, one thing that was pointed out to me recently that I'm really happy about is the way that Unchained was hit. They're not able to set up their monster negate as quick as they used to be able to, so they're more vulnerable to Nibiru now, which is great for us because Unchained is still very powerful and Nibiru is a good way of tackling them. But of course, Nibiru is also good for demolishing a bunch of other decks. I also run 3 copies of DD Crow. Again, the graveyard is pretty much your second hand in Yu-Gi-Oh! So if we can find a way to sort of rip cards out of your opponent's graveyard, definitely worth it. This not only gets rid of monsters such as like what Call by the Grave does, but also can get rid of pretty much any card. So if your opponent has a regurgitating spell or trap card that they keep activating in the graveyard, DD Crow is able to kind of like stop that by just banishing it altogether. So 3 copies of DD Crow, definitely very essential. I still think this deck can go first or second, but if we're really, really stuck and have to go second, 3 copies of Dark Ruler no more, I still find it to be very, very good. If we're going second, we obviously cannot OTK, it's just not an option for us, but we're able to easily negate all the effects of your opponent's monsters on the field, just for the cost of your opponent taking no damage for the rest of this turn, which I think is absolutely fine. Not only is it that, but also this is a spell card to able to power up our Sky Striker spells to get their full maximum potential after this card resolves. So definitely 3 copies of Dark Ruler no more I find to be very, very good for the side. Also the fact that this is spell speed 4, meaning that neither player can activate monster effects in response to this card's activation, means that this is really, really good for kind of breaking unbreakable boards as well. Speaking of breaking unbreakable boards, with the likes of Dark Ruler. What I find to go hand in hand with Dark Ruler is the final copy of Evenly Matched. We already run 2 in the main deck, so you already know what this card does. I round off the playset with this in the side deck. As I also aforementioned, Evenly Matched can be searched with Trust, but what I also do is run 1 copy of Dimensional Barrier and Different Dimension Ground, because these cards can be searched off of Thrust as well. And if we're in a situation going game 3 and your opponent is kind of siding to go against you, what you can do is, if they activate a monster effect, you can use Thrust and then you're able to set one of these cards, whichever could be more crippling to your opponent. Dimensional Barrier, if they play a deck that's heavily reliant on Fusion, Synchro, XYZ or whatever, you're able to completely demolish them with Dimensional Barrier. Or if they're heavily reliant on having their monster in the graveyard, your Unchained Eureka or whatever, Different Dimension Ground definitely really messes them up as well. So find 1 copy each of those is really good, really funny side deck options. Finally, rounding things off, you guys already know how accessible Labyrinth has become and how much I do not like the deck. So 3 copies of Royal Decree completely shuts them down, definitely run the side deck. What it does, negate all their trap effects on the field. Enough said. Completely shuts down Labyrinth. It can shut down the likes of Trap Tricks as well, but honestly not as much as it destroys Labyrinth. And considering how powerful Labyrinth's going to be in this coming format, 3 copies of Royal Decree in the side, definitely very essential to run. So that about does it for the deck. Please let me know what you think. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I think the 3 Upstart is definitely very good. Definitely helps elevate this deck to the next level. Still waiting for Engage to come to 3. I guess we'll just have to wait another while for that to happen. But overall, I'm still really happy with the way Sky Strikers are going. I'm really confident with this build. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. But please let me know what you guys think as well. If you guys haven't tested this deck yet, I definitely recommend you do. Sky Strike is a very easy deck to learn, but also very powerful, can steal games as well. Definitely try the deck out. Please let me know what you think. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's all. Plenty more to come.